Check your balance. Kid, look at those shoes. We don't serve street rats here. Get out.
It's not stolen. My grandma left it for me.
He thought the boy was alone. He was wrong.
You saw a boy in torn sneakers and you saw zero. You laughed at his shoes, but you aren't laughing at his bank account.
The sound of the bank was the first thing you noticed. It wasn't the sound of money. Money is quiet. It was the sound of exclusion. The soft click-clack of Italian leather heels on polished marble. The hushed, confident whispers of men discussing portfolios worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The hum of the air conditioning, which seemed to keep the air perfectly chilled, preserving the atmosphere of old wealth. In the center of this cathedral of capitalism stood a boy who didn't belong. His name was Marcus. He was 10 years old, though his eyes looked much older. He stood 4 feet, 5 inches tall, barely reaching the lip of the high mahogany counter. He was wearing a navy blue windbreaker that he had found in a donation bin 3 winters ago. It was frayed at the cuffs, and the zipper was stuck halfway up, revealing a t-shirt that had been washed so many times it was almost see-through. But it was the shoes that drew the eyes. They were high tops, or at least they used to be. The white rubber had turned a dull, street-stained gray. The laces were knotted in 3 places because they had snapped and been tied back together. And on the left shoe, right near the pinky toe, the canvas had burst open, revealing a bright blue sock. Marcus stood there, clutching a brown envelope so tightly his knuckles were turning the color of ash. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the scent of the lobby, a mix of floor wax, expensive cologne, and the metallic tang of coins. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said. His voice was small. It was the voice of a child who had been taught that speaking up usually led to trouble. Mr. Vance, the branch manager, didn't look up. He was busy typing on his keyboard, his manicured fingers dancing across the keys. Mr. Vance was a man who measured the world in numbers. If you didn't have at least 6 zeros behind your name, you were barely a rounding error in his day. "Sir," Marcus tried again, a little louder this time. Vance stopped typing. He didn't turn his head. He just rolled his eyes, a slow, theatrical gesture for the benefit of the teller next to him, Chelsea. "I heard you the first time," Vance said, his voice dripping with bored irritation. He finally swiveled his leather chair around. He looked at the top of Marcus's head. Then he looked down at the shoes. Then he looked at the envelope. A smirk curled the corner of his lip. It wasn't a smile. It was a weapon. "We don't sell candy bars here, kid," Vance said. "The convenience store is 2 blocks down. Go bother them." The teller, Chelsea, giggled. It was a nervous sound, the sound of someone who wanted to be part of the joke so they wouldn't become the target. Marcus felt the heat rise in his cheeks. He felt that familiar stinging sensation behind his eyes, the one that came whenever he realized the world was laughing at him. But he remembered Grandma Eleanor's voice. It was fresh in his mind, only 2 weeks gone. A small kitchen, the smell of frying bacon and old wood. Grandma Eleanor is sitting at a table with a wobbly leg, counting coins into a jar. "Don't you ever let them see you shrink, Marcus," she had said, pressing a quarter into his palm. "You come from kings and queens. They might not see your crown, but you have to know it's there. You hear me? You wear it inside." Marcus straightened his back. He pushed the hair out of his eyes. "I'm not selling candy," Marcus said, his voice trembling but clear. "I'd like to check my account balance, please." The silence that followed was heavy. Mr. Vance blinked. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the counter. "Your account balance?" "Yes, sir." Vance looked at Chelsea. Then he looked at the line of customers forming behind Marcus. There was a woman in a fur coat clutching a Prada bag, tapping her foot impatiently. There was a man in a golf shirt checking his Rolex. Vance burst out laughing. "Did you hear that, folks?" Vance announced, projecting his voice to the back of the room. "The financial tycoon here wants to check his balance." "What did you do, kid? Find a piggy bank in a dumpster?" The woman in the fur coat let out a sharp breath of annoyance. "Can we hurry this up? Some of us have actual banking to do." "You heard the lady," Vance said, his face hardening. The amusement was gone. Now he was just angry. "This is First National Heritage Bank. We serve clients. We don't serve." He waved his hand vaguely at Marcus's clothes. "Whatever this is, get out before I call security." Marcus didn't move. "I have an account," he insisted. He placed the brown envelope on the counter. "My grandmother left it to me. She died 2 weeks ago. She said the papers are in here." Vance stared at the envelope. It was wrinkled. It had a grease stain on the corner. It looked like trash. "Kid, I'm going to count to 3, Vance warned. "Sir, please just look," Marcus begged. He reached into the envelope. Vance sighed, shaking his head. 1. Marcus's small fingers fumbled with the papers. 2. Marcus pulled out a stack of documents, and then he pulled out the card. It landed on the marble counter with a heavy thud. Vance froze. He knew that sound. Plastic cards make a click. Credit cards make a snap. But this card? This card made a thud because it was made of metal. It was black, matte black, with a silver trim that caught the overhead halogen lights. In the center, embossed in silver letters, was the name, and below that the status, Sovereign Elite Reserve. The lobby went quiet. The woman in the fur coat stopped tapping her foot. The man with the Rolex lowered his wrist. For a banker, seeing a Sovereign Elite card was like a biologist seeing a unicorn. It was mythical. It meant unlimited. It meant do not ask questions. It meant the person holding this card could buy the building, fire the staff, and turn the lobby into a swimming pool if they wanted to. Vance stared at the card. His brain tried to process the data, but it hit a firewall of prejudice. Black card equals wealth. Black kid in torn shoes equals poverty. Therefore, stolen, Vance whispered. He didn't ask. He didn't verify, he decided. He snatched the card off the counter. Where did you get this? Vance hissed. Whose purse did you snatch this from? Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in? I didn't snatch it, Marcus cried, his voice rising in panic. It's my grandma's. She gave it to me. Liar, Vance shouted. He stood up, towering over the boy. People like you don't have grandmothers with sovereign accounts. People like you rob the people who do have these accounts. He turned to the security guard stationed by the door. Officer Davis, we have a 10-10 in the lobby, theft and attempted fraud. Officer Davis walked over. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that looked tired. He was black like Marcus. He looked down at the boy. He saw the terror in Marcus's eyes. He saw the way Marcus was shaking. Davis looked at the card in Vance's hand. He looked at the computer screen that Vance hadn't even bothered to touch. Mr. Vance, Davis said, his voice low. Maybe we should check the ID, the boy says. I don't pay you to think, Davis, Vance snapped, cutting him off. I pay you to keep the trash out. Now grab him. Davis hesitated. He looked at Marcus. He wanted to say something. He wanted to be the hero. But then he thought about his own bank account. He thought about his daughter's tuition due next week. He thought about how hard it was for a man his age to find a job with benefits. He made a choice that would haunt him for years. Come on, son, Davis said, reaching for Marcus's arm. No, Marcus pulled away. I'm not leaving. I have rights. Grandma said I have rights. Vance laughed again. Rights? You're a minor with stolen property. You have the right to remain silent. Vance pointed a finger to the far corner of the lobby, a desolate spot near the restrooms and the janitor's closet. There was a single rusted metal folding chair there. Sit, Vance commanded. Right there. If you move 1 inch, I'm calling the police. I'm calling corporate to report this card stolen, and when they get here, you better pray your grandma can bail you out of juvenile detention. Marcus looked at Davis. Davis looked away. Marcus looked at the woman in the fur coat. She looked at her phone. Marcus looked at Chelsea. She busied herself with a stack of deposit slips. He was completely, utterly alone. Defeated, Marcus walked to the corner. His sneakers squeaked on the marble. He sat on the metal chair. He pulled his knees to his chest. He took out the letter his grandmother had written him. He didn't read it. He just held it. He closed his eyes and tried to disappear. Time in a bank usually moves fast. It moves at the speed of transactions, of wire transfers, of signatures on dotted lines. But for Marcus, sitting on that cold metal chair near the janitor's closet, time had stopped. He was in what sociologists call social erasure. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Marcus made himself as small as possible. He pulled his knees up to his chest, trying to hide the hole in his sneaker. He watched the lobby like a ghost haunting a feast. He watched Mr. Vance greet a man in a pale yellow golf polo. Mr. Henderson, Vance boomed, his voice suddenly warm and syrupy. Good to see you. How's the handicap? Come on back. I'll have Chelsea bring you an espresso. An espresso? Marcus hadn't even been offered a glass of water. He watched the man in the golf shirt walk past him. The man glanced down at Marcus for a split second, not with sympathy, but with mild annoyance. Like Marcus was a stain on the carpet that the cleaning crew had missed. Marcus looked down at the brown envelope in his lap. He carefully unfolded the letter Grandma Eleanor had written. The paper was soft, worn down from being touched so many times. The handwriting was shaky, written in the final days when her hands trembled from the medication, but the blue ink was still strong. Read it to me, baby, Grandma Eleanor whispered from her bed. Marcus, holding the letter, read aloud. My brave Marcus, the world is going to try to tell you who you are. They will judge you by your zip code. They will judge you by your clothes. But you listen to me. Grandma reached out, her hand frail, touching his cheek. You are worth more than gold. You are a hidden crown. One day you will walk into rooms I was never allowed to enter. And when you do, you hold your head high. You don't ask for permission to exist. You take your space. Marcus wiped a tear before it could fall. I'm trying, Grandma, he whispered. But it's hard. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. It was an old model with a cracked screen held together by clear tape. He had 1 bar of service. He opened his texts. To Uncle Lawrence sent, 10:36 a.m. Uncle L, they kicked me out. They took the card. They said I stole it. I'm scared. He stared at the screen. The 3 little dots appeared, then disappeared, no reply. Uncle Lawrence was always busy. He traveled the world. Tokyo one day, London the next. Maybe he was on a plane. Maybe he was in a meeting. Maybe he wasn't coming. Across the lobby, Officer Davis stood by the glass doors. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot. Inside Davis's head, a war was raging. He looked at Marcus, shivering in the corner. He saw his own son in that chair. He saw himself, 30 years ago, being followed around a department store by a manager who thought he was going to steal a candy bar. Say something, Jerome, his conscience screamed. Walk over there. Buy the kid a soda. Tell Vance he's wrong. But then another voice spoke up. The voice of survival. You have a mortgage, Jerome. You have a pension. You have 2 years until retirement. Don't make waves. Vance is vindictive. He'll fire you and blacklist you before lunch. So Officer Davis did what most good people do when the cost of courage is too high. He adjusted his belt. He looked out the window. And he chose silence. Silence is not empty. Silence is heavy, and right now it was crushing Marcus. Hey, you! Vance's voice cut through the air. He snapped his fingers, pointing at Marcus. He didn't wave him over to the main desk with the comfortable chairs. He pointed to a small, cramped desk in the back, near the server room. It was where they processed loan rejections. Marcus stood up. His legs felt heavy. He walked past the woman in the fur coat, who pulled her purse closer to her body as he passed. Marcus sat in the hard plastic chair. Vance didn't sit. He leaned against the file cabinet, crossing his arms over his silk tie. He looked down at Marcus like an insect under a microscope. Let's try this again, Vance said. His voice was cold, clinical. Corporate fraud is on the line. They're running the numbers now. While we wait, why don't you tell me the truth? It'll go easier on you when the police arrive. I told you the truth, Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. My grandma was a teacher. She saved it. A teacher? Vance laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Kid, do you know math? Teachers make 40, maybe 50,000 a year, after taxes, rent, food. They don't have sovereign elite money. Drugs dealer money, maybe, lottery money, sure, but teacher money? Vance leaned in close. Stop lying. You found the card, or maybe some older guy put you up to this, using a kid as a mule. No, Marcus shouted. Don't you raise your voice at me. Vance slammed his hand on the file cabinet. Bang. Marcus flinched, shrinking back into the chair. I know your type, Vance sneered. You think the world owes you something. You think you can just walk into a place like this with your dirty shoes and your sad story and will just hand over cash. We built this bank to protect wealth from people like you. Marcus looked down at his shoes, the ones Vance hated so much. He remembered the day Grandma bought them. The thrift store smelled like dust. Grandma counted out $2 in dimes and nickels. They're a little worn, baby, she said, tying the laces. But they'll get you where you need to go. Shoes don't make the man. The steps you take do. My shoes are fine, Marcus whispered. What was that? Vance asked. I said, Marcus looked up. For the first time, a spark of anger burned through the fear. My shoes are fine. And my grandma was a queen. Vance stared at him, then he shook his head, disgusted. You're delusional, Officer Davis. Is the squad car here yet? Officer Davis looked at his watch. 5 minutes out, Mr. Vance. Good, Vance smirked. Enjoy your last 5 minutes of freedom, kid. Vance turned back to his computer, ready to type the final report that would ruin a 10-year-old's life. But he never hit the key, because at that exact moment the atmosphere in the bank changed. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure drop. The air suddenly felt heavier. Outside the glass doors a car had pulled up. It wasn't the police, it wasn't a customer. It was a sleek, obsidian-black Mercedes S-Class. It didn't park in a spot. It pulled right up to the curb, directly in front of the doors in the fire lane. The engine cut off. The back door opened. A polished black Oxford shoe stepped onto the pavement. Then a silver-headed cane. Then a man. He stood 6'4". He wore a charcoal gray bespoke suit that fit him like armor. He wore sunglasses, even though the November sky was gray. He didn't look at the building, he looked through it. He walked toward the doors with a limp, favoring his left leg, but he moved with a speed and intensity that made people step out of his way. Inside the lobby, Vance frowned. "Who is that? He can't park there." Officer Davis looked out the window. His eyes went wide. He recognized that walk. He recognized the cut of that suit. He recognized the aura of a man who doesn't ask for permission. "Mr. Vance," Davis stammered. The glass doors slid open. The wind blew in cold and sharp. The man stepped into the lobby. He took off his sunglasses slowly. His eyes scanned the room, past the tellers, past the customers, until they locked onto the back corner. They locked onto Marcus. And for the first time in 45 minutes, Marcus stopped shaking. "Uncle Lawrence," the lion had entered the den. And he looked hungry. The silence in the bank changed texture. Before, it was the silence of exclusion, cold and sharp. Now it was the silence of a predator entering the room. Lawrence Brooks did not run to his nephew. Men like Lawrence do not run, they arrive. He walked across the marble floor with a rhythmic, terrifying cadence. Click. The silver tip of his cane hitting the stone, step. The heavy thud of his shoe, click, step, click, step. Every eye in the lobby was glued to him. The woman in the fur coat lowered her sunglasses. The man in the golf shirt stopped checking his watch. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Mr. Vance, however, was too blinded by his own ego to see what was happening. He saw a man in a nice suit, yes, but he also saw a man ignoring bank protocol. "Excuse me," Vance shouted, stepping out from behind his desk. "Sir, you cannot park in the fire lane, and you certainly cannot walk past the security checkpoint." Lawrence didn't even blink. He didn't turn his head. He walked right past Vance as if the branch manager were a ghost. Lawrence went straight to the corner, straight to the metal chair, straight to the small, trembling boy with the hole in his shoe. He stopped. He took a deep breath, composing himself. Then the lion vanished and the uncle appeared. Lawrence knelt down. He didn't care about the dust on the floor. He didn't care about the crease in his $3,000 trousers. He got down on one knee so he was eye level with Marcus. "Hey, champ," Lawrence whispered. His voice was like warm honey, deep, safe, and familiar. Marcus looked up. His face was streaked with tears. His nose was running. He looked terrified. "Uncle L," Marcus choked out. I didn't steal it, I promise. They said I stole Grandma's card." "SHHH," Lawrence soothed, reaching out a large hand to gently wipe a tear from Marcus's cheek. "I know you didn't. I know exactly who you are." "They were going to call the police," Marcus sobbed, the dam finally breaking. "Mr. Vance said," he said, "teachers don't have money. He said I was a liar." At those words, Lawrence's hand froze for a split second on Marcus's shoulder. His jaw tightened. A small vein pulsed in his temple. "Did he?" Lawrence asked softly. "He laughed at my shoes, Uncle L," Marcus whispered, looking down at his feet. "Everyone laughed." Lawrence looked at the worn-out sneakers. He looked at the blue sock poking through. He remembered the day his mother, Marcus's grandmother, had bought those. He remembered how she had called him that night, crying because she couldn't afford Nikes for the boy's birthday. "I failed him, Lawrence," she had said. "No, Mama," Lawrence had told her. "You clothed him. That's not failure, that's love." Lawrence stood up. He helped Marcus to his feet. He brushed the dust off the boy's oversized jacket. He took the brown envelope from Marcus's shaking hands and tucked it into his own suit pocket. "You stand behind me, Marcus," Lawrence said. "Do not move, do not speak, just watch." Lawrence turned around. The uncle was gone. The lion was back. He faced the room. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, which was infinitely worse. Mr. Vance had walked over, his face red with indignation. Officer Davis was trailing behind him, looking like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. "Sir," Vance barked, standing 2 feet away from Lawrence. "I don't know who you think you are, but you are disrupting a federal financial institution. I am the branch manager, and I am ordering you to leave before I have you arrested for trespassing alongside this delinquent." Vance pointed a manicured finger at Marcus. Lawrence looked at the finger. Then he looked at Vance's face. "Delinquent," Lawrence repeated. The word rolled off his tongue like a curse. "Yes, delinquent," Vance sneered. "Now, unless you want to join him in the squad car, take your cane and get out." Lawrence smiled. It was a cold, razor-sharp smile. "Mr. Vance, is it?" Lawrence read the name tag on Vance's chest. "That's right, Bradley Whitmore Vance, remember it." "Oh, I will," Lawrence said. "Mr. Vance, I believe you have made a calculation error. A severe one." "The only error here is your parking," Vance scoffed. "No," Lawrence said, taking a step forward. Vance instinctively took a step back. "The error is that you assumed value is visible." You saw a boy in cheap shoes and you saw zero. You saw a black woman's name on a platinum card and you saw fraud. It is fraud, Vance yelled, playing to the audience in the lobby. Teachers don't have $500,000 accounts. It's mathematically impossible. My mother, Lawrence said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, didn't just teach, she invested. Every penny she saved, she gave to me to manage, for 30 years. While she rode the bus, her money was growing. While she wore old coats, her portfolio was compounding. Lawrence leaned in. She didn't live like a queen so that a man like you could treat her grandson like a peasant. Vance blinked. Uncertainty flickered in his eyes. You managed her money? I manage a lot of money, Mr. Vance. Before Vance could respond, the glass doors of the bank flew open again. This time it wasn't a calm entrance, it was a panic. A woman ran into the lobby. She was wearing a high-end business suit, but her hair was slightly windblown and she was out of breath. She was holding a briefcase as if it were a shield. It was Patricia Edwards, the regional director, the boss of Mr. Vance's boss. Vance's face went white. He knew her. He had seen her picture in the annual reports. He had never met her in person because people like Patricia Edwards didn't visit branches like this unless something was very, very wrong. Miss Edwards, Vance stammered, his arrogance instantly replaced by fear. What are you doing here? We weren't expecting. Patricia didn't even look at him. She walked straight past him, breathless, and stopped in front of Lawrence. The entire lobby watched. The woman in the fur coat lowered her phone. The tellers stopped typing. Patricia Edwards, the most powerful woman in the region, looked at the man with the cane. And then, she bowed her head. Mr. Brooks, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I got here as fast as I could. I was on the -95 when you called. Mr. Brooks, Vance whispered. The name sounded familiar. Patricia turned to Vance. Her eyes were blazing with fury. Bradley, she snapped. Do you have any idea what you've done? I caught a fraudster, ma'am. Vance pointed at Marcus, though his hand was shaking now. This man claims to be the uncle, but be quiet, Patricia hissed. This man is Lawrence Brooks. Vance looked blank. I don't. Lawrence Brooks, Patricia repeated, louder this time, addressing the whole room. Founder and CEO of Meridian Capital Holdings. The silence that followed was absolute. Meridian Capital. Even the customers knew the name. It was on the news. It was on the stock market ticker. But for a banker, it meant something more specific. Meridian Capital, Vance whispered, the color draining from his face until he looked like a corpse, is our largest institutional investor. They own 34% of this bank's parent company, Patricia said coldly. Which means, Bradley, Mr. Brooks isn't just a customer. She gestured to Lawrence, who stood tall, leaning on his lion-headed cane, guarding his nephew. In a very real sense, Patricia said, he is your owner. Vance looked at Lawrence. He looked at the cane, he looked at the charcoal suit, and finally he looked at Marcus, the boy he had called a street rat, the boy he had thrown in the corner. He realized with a sinking feeling in his stomach that felt like dying that he hadn't just insulted a customer. He had declared war on the king. The air in the lobby was so still you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Mr. Vance stood with his back pressed against the marble counter. He looked like a man who had stepped off a curb and realized too late that a bus was coming. He looked from Patricia Edwards to Lawrence Brooks, his brain desperately trying to find an escape hatch. Mr. Brooks, Vance stammered, his voice cracking. I honestly didn't know the boy he came in here looking like. Vance gestured helplessly at Marcus. Like what? Lawrence asked. The question hung in the air. Lawrence didn't shout it. He placed it gently in the space between them like a landmine. Well, he didn't look like a sovereign client, Vance whispered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. If I had known he was your nephew, if I had known he was related to you, obviously the protocol would have been different. Lawrence closed his eyes for a brief second. He let out a long, slow breath. When he opened his eyes, they were colder than deep space. And that, Lawrence said softly, is exactly the problem. Lawrence took a step closer. The click of his cane on the marble sounded like a judge's gavel. You are admitting, Lawrence said, that your respect has a price tag. You are admitting that if you knew he had money, you would have treated him like a human being. But because you thought he was poor, you treated him like trash. I was protecting the bank's assets, Vance pleaded, looking to Patricia for support. She gave him none. Her face was made of stone. Protecting assets? Lawrence repeated. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out the crumpled brown envelope. He placed it on the counter next to Vance's hand. Miss Edwards, Lawrence said, turning to the regional director. I would like you to open this account right now in front of everyone. Patricia nodded. She pointed at Chelsea, the teller who had giggled earlier. Log in, Patricia ordered. Pull up the account for Eleanor Brooks. Chelsea's hands were shaking so badly she missed the keys twice. She typed in her override code. She typed in the account number from the black card. Enter. The computer processed. The little hourglass spun. Everyone watched the screen. The woman in the fur coat leaned forward. Officer Davis took a step closer. Even Vance couldn't help but look. The screen flashed green. The profile loaded. Account holder, Eleanor Brooks. Account type, Sovereign Elite Trust. Current balance, $487,263.41. A collective gasp rippled through the lobby. Almost $500,000. Vance stared at the number. His mouth fell open. He blinked, trying to make the numbers rearrange themselves into something that made sense. But they remained stubborn. $487,000. He laughed at your shoes, Marcus, Lawrence said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. But I don't hear him laughing now. Lawrence turned to the lobby, addressing the customers who had watched Marcus be humiliated. My mother, Lawrence said, his voice thick with emotion, was a teacher for 40 years. She didn't have a CEO's salary. Do you know how she saved this money? He pointed at the screen. She saved it by eating rice and beans for dinner 3 nights a week. She saved it by sewing her own clothes. She saved it by walking to work in the rain because bus fare was $2 she could put in this account. Lawrence looked down at Marcus, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. She lived small so that her grandson could dream big. That number on the screen isn't just money, it is sacrifice, it is love in its purest form. Lawrence turned back to Vance. The sadness in his eyes vanished, replaced by the lion's fury. And you, Lawrence hissed, you looked at her sacrifice, you looked at the clothes she bought him, and you called it delinquent. You tried to steal his inheritance because you didn't like his sneakers. I didn't know, Vance cried out, desperate now. Mr. Brooks, please, I've been with this bank for 15 years. I have a mortgage. I made a mistake. No, Patricia Edwards spoke up. Her voice was sharp, cutting through Vance's panic. She walked around the counter. She stood in front of the computer, looking at the log files. A mistake is a typo, Bradley, Patricia said. This was not a mistake. She spun the laptop around so Vance could see. I'm looking at the incident report you started filing, Patricia said. You checked the box for aggressive behavior. You wrote that the subject was threatening staff. She looked at Marcus, who was clinging to his uncle's leg. Does that boy look aggressive to you? Patricia asked. Or were you falsifying a federal banking record to cover up your own bias? Vance froze. He knew the law. Falsifying records wasn't just a firing offense. It was a career-ending offense. It was the kind of thing that got you blacklisted from every financial institution in the country. Patricia, please, Vance whispered. We can handle this internally. A suspension. I'll take a suspension. Patricia straightened her blazer. She looked at Lawrence. Lawrence didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He just stared at Vance with the absolute indifference of a mountain looking at a bug. Bradley Whitmore Vance, Patricia said, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. Effective immediately, your employment with First National Heritage is terminated for cause. You can't do this, Vance yelled. I just did, Patricia replied calmly. You have violated our zero-tolerance policy on discrimination. You have falsified records, and you have brought reputational ruin to this branch. She turned to Officer Davis. Officer Davis, Patricia said. Davis jumped to attention. Yes, ma'am. Please escort Mr. Vance to his office to collect his personal keys and wallet. Do not let him touch a computer. Do not let him take any files. Then escort him off the premises. Davis looked at Vance, the man who had bossed him around for 5 years, the man who had made him throw Marcus out. Davis looked at Marcus, then he looked at Vance. For the first time in years, Davis stood up straight. Yes, ma'am, Davis said. He walked over to Vance. He didn't rough him up. He didn't yell. He just placed a heavy hand on Vance's shoulder. Let's go, Bradley, Davis said. He didn't call him sir, just Bradley. Get your hands off me. Vance shrugged him off. He looked around the lobby, searching for an ally. This is insane. I'm the victim here. I was doing my job. Go, Lawrence said, one word, simple. Final, Vance looked at the lion one last time. He saw no mercy. He looked at the customers. The woman in the fur coat looked away. The man with the Rolex was filming on his phone. Vance hung his head. He walked toward his office. The click of his expensive Italian shoes didn't sound confident anymore. It sounded lonely. Minutes later, he emerged with a cardboard box. He walked through the lobby. He walked past the tellers who wouldn't look at him. He walked past the spot where he had made Marcus sit. He walked out the glass doors. The wind outside was still cold, but inside the air suddenly felt cleaner. Patricia watched the doors close. Then she turned to Chelsea, the teller. Chelsea was shaking, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. She knew she was next. "Miss Edwards," Chelsea sobbed. I'm so sorry, I didn't want to. He was my boss." Patricia sighed. She looked at Lawrence. "What about her?" Patricia asked. "She was the accomplice." Lawrence looked at Chelsea. He saw a terrified young woman who had followed a bad leader because she was weak. "Fear makes people do ugly things," Lawrence said quietly. "But she didn't write the report, and she didn't call the police." He looked at Marcus. "What do you think, champ?" Marcus looked at the crying woman. He remembered her giggle. It had hurt. But he also saw how scared she was. Grandma Eleanor used to say, "Hate is too heavy a burden to carry, baby. Put it down." "She can stay," Marcus whispered. "If she promises never to laugh at shoes again." Lawrence smiled, a genuine smile this time. "You heard the king," Lawrence said to Patricia. "She stays on probation." Patricia nodded. "Probation it is." She turned to the lobby. "We are closed for the next hour for an emergency staff meeting," she announced. "Everyone except Mr. Brooks and his nephew, please clear the floor." As the customers filed out, the man with the Rolex stopped by Marcus. He looked at the boy, he looked at the shoes. "Nice kicks, kid," the man said, and he meant it. Marcus smiled. He looked down at his sneakers. They were still dirty. They still had a hole, but for the first time all day, they didn't feel heavy. The automatic doors slid shut behind them. The silence of the bank was replaced by the noise of the city, traffic, wind, life. Lawrence walked Marcus to the black Mercedes. He opened the back door not like a chauffeur but like a father figure. "Uncle L," Marcus asked, hesitating before getting in. "Yeah, champ. Did we win?" Lawrence paused. He looked at the bank building, a fortress of glass and stone that had nearly crushed a 10-year-old boy's spirit. "We won the battle, Marcus," Lawrence said softly, adjusting the collar of Marcus's oversized jacket. "But the war against people thinking they're better than you because of what you wear, that war lasts a lifetime." Lawrence pointed a finger at Marcus's chest. "But today, you learned something important. You learned that your crown isn't in that bank account, it's right here." He tapped Marcus's heart. "Money comes and goes, dignity, that stays." Marcus nodded. He touched his chest. He felt lighter. As they drove away, Marcus looked out the window. He saw Officer Davis standing by the entrance, watching them leave. Davis raised a hand in a hesitant wave. Marcus waved back. Grandma Eleanor always said, "Forgiveness isn't for them, baby, it's for you. Hate is too heavy to carry." The bank's security footage was sealed by legal teams. It never saw the light of day. But in the modern world, nothing stays hidden forever. The man in the golf shirt, the one with the Rolex, had been filming. He didn't post the video to mock Marcus. He posted a confession. The video appeared on TikTok on a Tuesday morning. It was just the man's face, looking into the camera, looking ashamed. "I was there," the man said in the video. "I was at the First National Heritage Bank on Monday. I watched a manager humiliate a kid for wearing broken shoes. And I did nothing. I laughed. I checked my watch. I thought about my tea time." The man paused, wiping his eye. "Then I found out that kid had more character in his pinky than I have in my whole body. I learned that silence makes you an accomplice. So this is me telling the world we have to do better. I have to do better." The video went viral. 5 million views in 48 hours. It sparked a national conversation. People started sharing their own stories of being judged, of being dismissed, of being invisible. The hashtag #HiddenCrowns began to trend. Marcus never saw the video. Lawrence made sure he stayed off social media. He wanted Marcus to be a boy, not a symbol. But the world changed around him anyway. 3 weeks later, Officer Davis kept his job, but he was a different man. The slump in his shoulders was gone. 3 weeks after the incident, a young Hispanic woman entered the bank. She was nervous, clutching a stack of cash she wanted to wire home. Her English was broken. The new teller, Vance's replacement, hadn't arrived yet, was getting impatient. "I can't understand you," the teller snapped. "If you can't speak English, step aside." The old Jerome Davis would have looked at the floor. The new Jerome Davis stepped forward. "Hey," Davis said, his voice deep and firm. The teller looked up, startled. Davis walked over. He stood between the teller and the woman. "She is a customer," Davis said. "Take a breath, listen to her, and treat her with respect, or I will report you myself." The teller froze. He saw the look in Davis's eyes, a look that said never again. "I'm sorry," the teller stammered. He turned to the woman, softening his tone. "Let's try again, ma'am, slowly." Davis walked back to his post. His heart was pounding. But for the first time in 11 years, the air in the lobby didn't feel heavy. It felt like he could breathe. Georgetown University, 8 years later, time is the ultimate judge. 8 years passed. The snow melted and returned. Governments changed. Stocks rose and fell. And Marcus Brooks grew up. It was a crisp autumn day in Washington, D.C. The leaves on the campus of Georgetown University were turning gold and crimson. Marcus stood in his freshman dorm room. He was 18 now, 6 feet tall, broad shoulders. He wore a crisp button-down shirt and clean, new loafers. He looked every inch the scholar. His roommate, a kid named Chad from Connecticut, was unpacking on the other side of the room. "Man, this place is intense," Chad said, unpacking a gaming console. "My dad says the workload is killer. You nervous?" "A little," Marcus smiled. "But I'm ready." Marcus opened his suitcase. He unpacked his laptop, a gift from Uncle Lawrence. He unpacked his books. And then he pulled out a clear plastic display box. Inside the box were a pair of shoes. They were gray high tops. The laces were knotted. The canvas on the left toe was burst open. They were ugly, dirty, and destroyed. Chad stopped unpacking. He stared at the box. Bro," Chad asked. "What is that?" "These," Marcus touched the plastic case gently. "Yeah, why did you bring trash to college? Are those lucky shoes or something?" Marcus picked up the box. He looked at the hole in the toe. He remembered the cold marble floor. He remembered the laughter. He remembered the feeling of being small. "They aren't trash," Marcus said softly. "They're my compass." "Your compass?" "Yeah," Marcus turned to his roommate. "My grandmother bought these for $2 because she was saving every penny to get me here. She wore the same coat for 15 years so I could have a future." Marcus placed the box on the highest shelf, right next to a framed photo of Eleanor Brooks. "People look at these and see poverty," Marcus said. "I look at them and I see love. I keep them there to remind me." "Remind you of what?" Chad asked, his voice quiet now. "To never judge a book by its cover," Marcus said, "and to remember that dignity isn't something you buy. It's something you carry." Chad looked at the shoes. Then he looked at Marcus. He nodded, a newfound respect in his eyes. "That's heavy, man, respect." We live in a world that is obsessed with the wrapper. We judge the gift by the paper it comes in. We judge the soul by the shoes it walks in. Bradley Vance looked at a boy and saw nothing because he was blind to the things that actually matter. But Eleanor Brooks, she saw a king, and because she believed it, Marcus became it. There are hidden crowns everywhere. The janitor who sings while he works. The single mother counting change at the grocery store. The quiet kid in the back of the class with holes in his sneakers. They are all royalty in disguise, waiting for their moment, waiting to be seen. So the next time you walk into a room, look closely, look past the clothes, look past the titles, look past the shoes. You never know who you might be talking to. And if you are the one walking through the storm right now, if you are the one with the broken shoes and the heavy heart, keep your head up. Your time is coming. Dignity is not given. It is carried. Carry yours with pride.